And now, here are your hosts, the Schnitzel Boys.
I was very excited to see you today.
Me
Uh,
too. I was
I
excited to do
was,
that.
but then now it's a little bit of there's a little bit of a downer because der Kaiser died.
That's right. I felt exactly the same way. We had a little bit of a holiday hiatus,
Yeah.
maybe even longer than we did last year, and I was excited to talk to you again. I love Monday Night Schnitzel Night. But yeah, I woke up this morning. I went on Kicker, usually to do my German football check-in, great source, and it was just the Kaiser is tot.
Yeah.
And it's all over the news, and there's homages. Even ESPN did a little homage. Everyone's pulling a little homage out of their butt. And I figure, let's pull an homage out of our butts too.
We got butts to
Kaiser
pull homages out of.
rest. Yeah. I mean, if it's done day up. So I was just telling you, there's a huge 90-minute documentary on German TV tonight about their Kaiser. So their timing was excellent because he died yesterday.
Wow.
He died on der Kaiser Franz Beckenbauer died on Sunday. His family told everybody today, Monday. He was, I guess, dealing with health issues privately for the last couple of years. It's funny, Bjorn. So I went. It's funny. He's like, the universe works in mysterious ways, I would say. Would you agree? I disagree.
Yeah, I would agree.
So we had our friend Uli Hesse on about a year ago, and he wrote this great Franz Beckenbauer book, and I bought it, but it's been, I haven't got to it right away. And then over the holiday season, I finally started reading it, and it's a great book. Uli Hesse is such a great writer.
He had interesting things to say about him too when we talked to him. Yeah, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, which I brought up, and it's touched on in his book, and I'm not 100% done with this book, but about 2/3 done with this book, and it's a great book. And then I visit my parents over the holidays around that same time, and I didn't tell them I was reading a Franz Beckenbauer book, but for whatever reason, Franz Beckenbauer came up in conversation with me and my parents, and I think my dad just asked, "What's he up to? Where is he?" And I'm like, he hasn't really been in the public eye over the last few years. He's been away. He had that thing, like he's had those complications and with his FIFA scandal and stuff. We can talk about that in a bit.
Right.
But so, and I said, oddly enough, I'm reading Franz Beckenbauer's biography. So he's just in the ethos for some reason, randomly. He's just in the ethos. There's no reason he's out and about. I didn't talk about where he was last year. For whatever reason, this year we asked, where's Franz Beckenbauer? And then cut to today, a week later or 2 weeks later, he passed away. And he's in the news, and now we know where Franz Beckenbauer is. And I reached out to my parents. I told them, funny, we talked about him. He passed away. And then I mentioned the documentary, and they're watching the documentary, and I'm going to watch the documentary about him. It's like a in-depth look at Franz and things like that, and his life. And it's just interesting how he's in the ethos. The world kind of knew something was up with that. The Franz Beckenbauer was maybe on his last legs. And then for an athlete, 78 is very young.
Yeah, he's not super. I mean, some people are running for president at that age.
Yeah, and running their second term at that age. Yeah, no, I know. I guess if you're an athlete, it doesn't really matter because as a professional athlete, you can really abuse your body in your younger years, and maybe that has some long-term effects that maybe we don't realize. I don't know what he died of, but I do know, speaking of this biography, that the NASL days, although good for him, playing on American AstroTurf in the 70s wrecked his legs. He really couldn't play much after that.
Oh, is that true? Okay.
Yeah. He had a stint when his days at NASL were done. He went to go play for Hamburg in one of his lesser known parts of his career, one of his more quiet parts of his careers. He played for HSV for 2 seasons, I think, maybe 3. And he was still world class, but the dude had some pretty wrecked knees at that point because of Giant Stadium, and because of that, he's the AstroTurf in Texas and things like that. That's just a clue to maybe whatever other health stuff he had. But yeah, Franz Beckenbauer has passed away. Bjorn,
yeah,
you were around more in Germany in the day.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's right. I'm older. I am yeah, I mean he's pretty exactly my parents' age generation. So yeah, definitely was somebody who followed me. I mean, I was a little bit my first World Cup memory is 78 where he was not on the national team anymore. So I sort of missed his prime. I don't remember him as a player. As a player, I remember him at the Cosmos, where they would they would show little clips on Die Sportschau of Franz Beckenbauer playing on some football field or turf or whatever, and it just blew my mind. It was like if they had pictures of him playing on the moon, I could not have been sort of more bewildered by. I was like, what is happening? And it seemed and that was a weird thing as a kid that he went so early. Like he wasn't that old, like he was like 32 or I think when he
yeah.
went to the Cosmos. So I think as Uli Hesse um kind of talked about, he was a bit of an odd guy. He wasn't necessarily universally beloved. He was definitely appreciated. Yeah, like I said, I knew of his reputation. I hadn't seen him play all that much as a kid, but his reputation was basically redefining or inventing that position of sweeper, kind of a playmaker that is also that's very deep, basically, also a defender. Sometimes
Libero.
even some libero in German. Sometimes even behind the defense, and so yeah, very influential as a player, but as a public figure, kind of an oddball. Went to New York and was really into that by all accounts. There's if you see him talk about it in that documentary, Once in a Lifetime, his eyes glaze over. His time in New York City, whatever the footballing, soccer successes were, he had a good time in New York
Right.
in the late 70s, which one can imagine. There was probably a lot of cocaine involved, and
Yeah, that's what we're here
and
for.
some
How
and
much
some
did Franz
ladies.
Beckenbauer do cocaine? That's what we're trying to talk about.
That's what we're not gonna, we
Yeah.
won't answer that. I wasn't there.
How hard did he party?
Um,
So a couple of
but
things though.
no, sorry, let me
You
just
go. You go.
but then he became kind of he got back into the German public eye after taking over the national team, which kind of had fallen into some disrepute. The 82 especially comes to mind. In 1982, the sort of scandalous performance against Austria, and there was just this very cynical kind of vibe around the national team. They're like, well, we're the very results driven. We're not here to inspire anyone. We're just here to like win, like get the result and go. So there was like bad vibes. And when he took over, he basically he turned that around. First in '86, made the final with a very sort of mediocre team that a friend of mine in Germany, her father was a big journalist for Der Spiegel, and he told a story that before the 1986 World Cup final, he was interviewing Franz Beckenbauer, and he all of a sudden started laughing because it's like, well, tomorrow we could be World Cup winners with Eder and Schwarzman, like sort of denigrating the players at the time. But then in 1990, actually won the whole thing with really a very good, which is really a legendary team, and a pretty convincing beginning to end kind of good performance. And that's the memory. That's my when I heard he died, that was the first memory that came to mind. And it was funny. I just saw on the Kicker homepage they kind of were talking about this when after they won the final, he kind of wandered. He sort of wandered the field, the pitch by himself in this sort of kind of forlorn way, like just sort of taking it all in and really kind of having a moment to himself. just sort of reflect, I guess, or process what just happened. And that was kind of yeah, I remember that. And that sort of stuck with me, that image of this guy kind of just by himself, like wandering around and kind of and so that's sort of the vibe I got from him. He's not the, one of those like the blowhards of the Hoeneß Rummenigge category who just keep wanting to be who keep thinking that their opinion matters more than anyone else's. Like he did not necessarily seek the public eye in the way that other people are doing. And yeah, just it definitely, he's one of those guys that kind of have been around my entire life, and kind of, so it definitely hit me a little bit when I heard about this today. It's like one of those is one of those people that just have kind of, yeah, I have a lot of memories of.
Yeah, I would like to have heard his opinion on what's going on these days again, Yeah, no, it's very well spoken. I was listening to another podcast and I felt they were doing it kind of quick, but I felt they didn't give him just deserves, or they didn't give him his due. Pretty much they were sheepishly being like, yeah, it can be argued that he's one of the most important people of German football, or something, as we said. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure, like, call me crazy, but Franz Beckenbauer is number one when it comes to German football, right? He's number one. I get Fritz Walter, I get Sepp Herberger. I know he's of a different generation. But when it comes to Deutsches Fußball and German football, Franz Beckenbauer is star number one.
Well, he
right?
won the World Cup as a player and a coach. There's not that many of those.
Yeah. And he was a star since he was like 16. He's always been a star. He's the German Messi in that way. He's like, the world follows him. He's his own brand. And, back before, up until about 10 years ago, when he was the Bayern München president, people were asking his opinion. The limelight always followed him. He didn't have to seek it out. People were always asking him, following him, listening to him. Then he sort of retired and then got out of the limelight. Yeah, and let Uli Hoeneß and Rummenigge do all the speaking after that.
Right.
But now, in my mind, if we had to build a German football Mount Rushmore, Franz Beckenbauer would be the biggest face in the middle.
Oh,
right?
No question. Yeah, no question. I mean, like you were alluding to, his reputation had a little tarnished due to these bribery allegations in relation to getting the 2006 World Cup to Germany. So there was a little bit, although in the end, they just let the clock run out on the statute of limitations. Like he never got convicted of anything. But yeah, there was definitely, I mean, there's he's one of the many luminaries that try to get their fingers into the cookie pot of FIFA. So, but yeah, other than that, I think for sure he's the guy. There's two other people. Interestingly, Mario Zagallo, the Brazilian, who was the first one to win, he also died 2 days ago. 2 days ago,
yeah, very sad. Huge legend of Brazilian football. Yeah.
So he also, and the only other guy is Didier Deschamps. Those are the three people who won the World Cup as a player and coach. And
Mario Zagallo is a special category because I think 2002 being the exception, but up until 2002, Mario Zagallo was involved with all four Brazilian World Cup winning teams. All four of them.
Yeah.
Because he was a player in 58 and 62, I think, maybe even a coach. He was the coach or the assistant coach in 70, and he was on the coaching staff in 94. So he was involved, like, he's his own category.
Yeah.
But yeah, Franz won as a player, then later as a coach. And like
Didier Deschamps, did he really coach the team? Or but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we're not here to discuss who coached it better, Franz in 90 or Didier Deschamps in 2018. But what I will say, a couple things to what you're saying. because I'm reading his book, so I have a little insight into some specifics.
Oh, great.
How apropos. The 1978 World Cup team really wanted Franz Beckenbauer. They were campaigning him for months upon months upon
They
months.
could have used him.
And Franz was like, yeah, I'll do it. Why not? But the Erdogan brothers of the New York Cosmos, do you know who the Erdogan brothers are?
I do not.
They are the founders of the New York Cosmos before Warner Communications bought them. The Erdogans founded Atlantic Records. Atlantic Records, a huge record label.
Oh, Erdogan. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Erdogan.
Erdogan, like, yeah. ERTOG. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and not the modern Erdogan. These are two Turkish brothers who moved to New York back in the day and became huge record producers, and they were soccer fans. So they started.
Right. No, I remember this from the documentary.
Anyway, they couldn't lose because back then a World Cup squad was like a 3-month commitment. I think they had a month or 2-month long prep camp before the tournament or something, and pretty much they were looking at losing funds for 3 months, and they're like, we can't, like, we're touring the New York Cosmos. It's a summer league. So we can't lose funds for the summer. It's like we spend a lot of money on him, and we need him for our games. So they nixed it, and he stayed at the New York Cosmos in summer of '78 because he was their new star, especially with Pele leaving in '77. So
we got Heinz Flohe instead for the 1978. Yeah,
deep pull. I'm gonna have to Google that guy.
And that no, he was the Cologne. He was the Cologne guy. And that team then famously lost to Austria 3-2 to when a tie would have gotten them into the semis.
But like you said, later he took over after Jupp Derval in '82. But what I was going to say is, let's talk a little bit about Franz and the scandals, because Franz said many. And this is a good Germany topic for you, so you could like help me out here a little bit.
Okay.
So, well, first and foremost, we got boys are back in the chat. Hans Wolf saying hello, Happy New Year, folks.
Happy New Year, Hans and Sebas. Good to see you.
Seb asks, yo, the New York Red Bulls and Forsberg. What do you guys think about New York Red Bulls and make them good again? That's right. We got Red Bulls talk. We talked beforehand if we want to touch on MLS at all today. We'll see. Maybe later in the show. But we do want to give Franz Beckenbauer his due. And because the Bundesliga is kicking off this weekend, we want to maybe touch on the Bundesliga a little bit too. But I just want to talk about his scandal. So, yeah, what's a FIFA is one thing. I'll talk about that in a second. But reading his book, right, in his younger days, Franz Beckenbauer was
tax issues. Is that what you're talking about?
He had tax issues. That's one.
Mm-hmm.
But the big scandal was he had a young pregnant girlfriend he refused to marry. So this is where the Germany stuff comes into play. I've had stories. I'm sure your family has stories. Back in the day, in the, whatever, 40s, 50s, up to the 60s, maybe the 70s, there were a lot of unwritten rules about German culture. There weren't law, but there was like church rules you followed. Like I've heard so many of these. Like if someone, like I think my great grandfather had a woman he was unwed to, and they forced him to marry her because it's like you have to be married, or stuff like that.
Right.
And in the 60s, young Franz had a pregnant girlfriend he didn't marry, and like that was a huge scandal back then because you just didn't do that. The German church doesn't allow that kind of stuff. Right, like you probably hear stories like that all the time.
I'm the product of such a marriage. Yeah, my like.
Oh wow, we're getting deeper there. Really.
If you, that's the truth of it. If you, my parents got married 6 months before I was born, and my mother would joke that I was a preemie, but I was not. So
because they were avoiding the skin, because they try to convince their family that you were.
You're right. That was definitely that's what you would did if you were pregnant and then you got married. That's them's the rules. Yeah, for sure.
Also, when he moved to New York, this is just one of my many. He moved with his wife, his legal wife, but that was for show. He was dating someone else at the time. He was dating his girlfriend, his secret girlfriend. So they moved to New York together, and in German press, the wife had to be like, "Oh, I'm so excited to move here with Franz," and blah, blah, blah. But the reality was they were separated. She wasn't moving to New York. She was just there for show for a couple of weeks before she went back to München to live with the kids. And his girlfriend was then, they were bait and switching, and his girlfriend was going to move to New York. And she had a great time going to Studio 54 and living. Him and his girlfriend were living up in New York. Franz's kids were still back in München with his legal wife at the time. That kind of stuff. That was very scandalous at the time. Nowadays celebs are like that. They were like that then too, but now I think there's less of a PR issue with that. But back then it was such an issue that they had to lie to the press about it, pretty much, for stuff like that.
About him,
about his personal life, about him having
right.
girlfriends, and about him having kids out of wedlock. Back then the church, that was not a thing you did in German society.
Yeah.
So those are that phase. And in my opinion, I look at that as being someone who's very ahead of his time. Very hippie, right? Very,
if you want to give him credit. Yeah. I mean, he, I think that's definitely seems to be, he was doing his own thing. He was not swayed by public opinion necessarily.
And the public didn't like that.
It's also, I mean, the Germans have a weird, I was thinking about this recently, watching the Boris Becker documentary. The Germans have sort of a weird relationship with their celebrities, like there's a people get excited when like when Boris Becker was big in tennis internationally, won Wimbledon, of course the country went nuts. But there's also always this undercurrent of like, who do you think you are? Like, don't think, don't think you're special. And I think he thought he was special a little bit. Like he was kind of maybe thought that his celebrity or status or afforded him certain liberties, and other people didn't like that. That's a very German thing, to not like that.
Especially with my I think my parents are from the same generation your parents are for. Showing off is a cardinal sin.
No.
Cardinal sin. There's no showing off. And like you said with Boris Becker and Franz Beckenbauer, like they're celebrities, but like you said, they're not allowed to have flashy cars and show off and stuff like that. Or if they choose to do that, that's frowned upon. We're here in America. That's the point.
Oh, that's the whole point. Yeah, that's just right. Very different. Very different. Yeah.
And I still struggle, like with my dad. I mean, we still struggle over that to this day.
That you like to flaunt your enormous wealth?
Yeah. I'm just like, I don't care how big my debts are getting. Increase. Like my mom tells me a story when she was little. Her mother bought a new dress. And the neighbors said, "Hey, nice dress," or whatever. And my mom chimed in. It's like, "Yeah, we just bought it today," or something. And my mom got in so much trouble for that because, like, they were not allowed to show off that they could afford a new dress or something.
Really?
Yeah. We're talking late. We're talking the 50s here. Maybe that's more a look into my crazy ass family, but I'm just trying to say the idea of showing off is like frowned upon.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, I would say in Germany for sure, people will have opinions about the cars you have and yeah.
But anyway, and then he had a tax issue in the book. It talked about he sold his house and the German tax authorities raided his office. His business manager was
much like Boris Becker as well.
Oh, the tax man, death and taxes. And in Germany, taxes are higher than here in the United States. But Robert Schwan moved all his offices to Switzerland, where they were a little more protected, and he had all these weird rules about, because back then there was also laws against earning as a footballer. The Bundesliga was new. They were newly professional, but they had in typical German fashion, slow and steady, just like we see today. They're like, okay, we'll be professional, but we've got rules. You can't make more than X. You can't do this. You can't get sold. They have all these rules to slowly inchworm their way out of the amateur level that they used to be involved with. And, part of his move to the New York Cosmos was related to that tax stuff. The tax stuff was getting at him, and it was really heating up. And the opportunity to move to New York alleviated that in some way. In America, you pay way less taxes, and if his income came from New York, It kind of solved a lot of his tax issues. That's A. And B, in New York City, he could live a very anonymous life. Like a couple of German tabloid photographers would bother him every now and then. We did a piece for the New York Times. According to the book, there was a 30-minute documentary that NBC4 did in New York in the late 70s about him. I would love to get my hands on that. That would be 70s, glorious 70s footage. I'd love to get my hands on. But, in New York, kind of like how people go to MLS today, like Guillermo Barros Escalotto, who was a Boca Junior superstar, couldn't leave the house. And he moves to Ohio, goes to Kroger with his kids. No one knows where the hell he is. He lives a perfectly anonymous life.
Thierry Henry would take the path to Red Bull Arena a couple times.
Yeah, so he had New York, late 70s, a great party scene. He was just celeb enough where he had a good time but wasn't bothered terribly. And then, I guess he grew up a little bit. And then, like you said,
got to hang out with Shep Messing. I mean, it's everybody's dream.
Everybody's dream. And then I think, like you said, there's that famous footage of him walking, which I just learned about recently. Again, reading the book, when Lothar Matthäus was lifting the cup and Jürgen Klinsmann was running around, when the team was cheering and popping champagne, the cameras panned over to a Franz Beckenbauer in his suit, wandering alone, just with his hands in his pockets, in a very mission accomplished, German football is saved. I was the father you were looking for. I did it. I delivered. Like, I am your savior. Not like in a I am your savior, but in a very much like, you know what, old man, Uncle Franz took care of German football for all of us. And it's like, he won. He won the title twice, and he went full circle. He's now a mature adult. He's not the young whippersnapper he once was back in the day, and it kind of was full circle for him at that moment.
Yeah, I wonder what was going through his head then. But it was a very poignant moment.
Yeah. And then later he was a coach and a manager and the president of Bayern München. Then the big German scandal, which I think is over exaggerated a little bit. Yeah, he bribed officials so that Germany could win 2006. That's how every World Cup happens.
Back in those days, it seems like that's the case. Yeah,
that was just the beginning of them.
That's how the game was played at the time. Yeah.
And then I thought it was a great World Cup in 06. He did wonders. It's another great Franz thing, pulling that maneuver off to get the World Cup to Germany, which led to Das Reboot, which led to youngsters like Philipp Lahm and Bastian Schweinsteiger to move on and become the next generation. And South Africa was supposed to get that tournament, but they didn't get till 2010, and they struggled to keep up with standards even for 2010. So in my mind, it's a blessing in disguise. I mean, South Africa was a great tournament, and they just managed to pull it off, but they had a lot of stadium issues.
Except for those vuvuzelas were horrible.
That's true. That was ridiculous. But for a country that just struggled to organize a 2010 World Cup, like, imagine if they won it in 06. So in my mind, Franz Beckenbauer is a blessing in disguise. Had a few more years to get their act together.
All right.
Well, don't speak ill of the dead. I want to shine a little light on that. But that was the big thing that got him in trouble a little bit. And I think he was banned from FIFA activities for a couple of years or whatever all that nonsense was. And then we didn't see much of him after that. And that was Franz. So, yeah. I just look at his scandals over the years and sitting here in 2024 as like, a hip American dude who was covered in freedoms. I don't know. A lot of that stuff seems so ridiculous looking back on it to me. I think. And it's very indicative of the times, which the zeitgeist of Franz Beckenbauer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, rest in peace, Franz. He not only was he one of the great godfathers of German football, he was a big part of the NASL here in the United States, getting stuff going here. Fun fact, Bjorn.
Yep.
When the United States won the World Cup, they had 3 things that they had to commit to as part of the agreement. One was to launch a professional soccer league, which became Major League Soccer.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot what the other one was. Stadiums or something. I forgot. But then the third one was that Franz Beckenbauer was going to become the technical director of U.S. Soccer.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that never happened.
That never happened, but it was talked about in the day.
Oh,
And
interesting.
he could have held a bigger part of
And then they got
US hockey.
Klinsmann. They got Klinsmann instead.
Yeah, Klinsmann instead, who took the job and criticized the player pool and the timeline. And then after 8 years of collecting money, he's like, well, bye-bye.
If yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not in the same category, those two.
I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts on Franz Beckenbauer?
I think that's it. Like I said, he was on my mind today.
Another thing of Franz Beckenbauer I wanted to offer. That's a little out of our segment here, but Franz Beckenbauer was an 1860 München youth player.
Yeah.
And then someone slapped him in a game, and he's like, "Screw this! I'm going to Bayern." And him and his boys went off to Bayern, and they became the greatest German team in the 20th century in German soccer.
Yeah.
And Bayern München,
and at the time they were not a big deal. At the time they were, those.
So in addition to Franz Beckenbauer's accomplishments, he won 6 titles and blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, but he did it with creating like his Bayern München team won 3 Euro Cups in a row, or whatever, the Cup Winners' Cups in a row, or whatever it was called, and 6 Bundesligas. But they were a new team. It's like Beckenbauer, and then Sepp Maier, and then Paul Breitner, and then Gerd Müller, and like his boys. He created, and Uli Hoeneß was there too, I think, involved in that around that time. He was the leader of the generation of the team that turned Bayern München, the club it is today, and in turn also was key figures on the national team when he won the 74 World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the 74 World Cup's starting lineup was half the Bayern München starting lineup. That was just the Schnitzel Boys video on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. If you like that one, we've got a couple other ones right over here. And if you like that one, don't be afraid to subscribe, like, and ring that bell.
It's the Schnitzel Boys, it's the Schnitzel Boys, it's the Schnitzel